Alright, so today I want to show you what the influence of het clown can do to a ball python. I actually produced a whole bunch of het clowns here in my collection. I have a bunch of hatchlings. I want to pull those hatchlings out and compare them side by side with similar snakes that don't contain one copy of the clown gene. And keep in mind the clown is a recessive gene, and most of the times if you have a recessive gene you need two copies of the gene for a visual, and most of the times with the recessives you just can't see one copy of the gene. I'd say pretty much the only exception that I know of for sure is every now and then with het pieds. I say maybe 1 in 10, maybe 2 in 10 het pieds you can actually see tracks right along the belly, and usually the tracks are right underneath the tail, right past the vent, from kind of going right from the belly down to the vent, usually in the bottom third of the snake, and it almost looks like someone took a Sharpie marker and drew lines on either side of the belly, and that's a sure indication that you have het pied. And kind of the interesting thing with the het pied is I've only really seen it if you have like a normal ball python, like a wild type without any other genes. I've actually seen the markers if you have a pastel. I'd say less frequency. I'd say maybe I've ever seen like 2 or 3 pastels in my whole life that had het pied markers. Usually it's just the normals, and then when you start adding other genes to the het pied, usually it completely eliminates all the tracks on the belly. You just don't know. It's kind of like invisible. You can't tell if the het pied is in there or not unless you know the breeding for that pair. So the het clown's a little bit different. It's kind of interesting. As a matter of fact, I actually did a video quite a while ago. I think it's been like 2 or 3 years where I was doing the influence of different hets. And when it came to het clowns, I was pretty much going off of what everyone was telling me, that I was breeding clowns and ending up with het clowns. One guy actually produced a whole bunch of het clowns, and he said every single one actually had a line from the vent underneath the tail, from the vent all the way to the tip of the tail. He had a line, like someone had a Sharpie marker and drew a line. And let me tell you, I asked so many people about the line underneath the tail and nobody could reproduce it. I think it was just kind of a one-time fluke for that guy. I've actually seen a lot of people say it kind of changes the patterns on the side of the snake, and a lot of people said with one copy of the clown it actually brightens the snake, and that is what I've actually seen here in my collection. It seems like all my het clowns are significantly brighter than a lot of my other snakes, which is pretty interesting, although it can be kind of deceiving. So for example, this is the first time I actually took my banana inchy clown, where all my het clowns came from, and produced a whole bunch of snakes. And it's kind of interesting with that inchy. The inchies are really super bright that I produced, but the question is all right, is the bright inchy due from the presence of the het clown, or is it due to the certain line of inchy that just happens to be a lot brighter than other lines of inchy? And it's kind of the same way if you actually have normals too. Sometimes you can actually just take random normals from different clutches with no hets, guaranteed no hets, put them side by side, and you'll get some normals that are really super bright and some normals that are almost as dark as like a black hen, like super dark normals. So sometimes it can kind of trick you just kind of going through this. So I'm going to try to show you based on what I'm seeing here in my collection, but it does seem that all my het clowns are significantly brighter than my non-het clowns. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start pulling snakes, and we'll compare some of these side by side, see if we can make a conclusion to see if the het clown actually brightens the ball pythons. Alright, so take a look at this. I pulled a couple hatchlings, brand new hatchlings out of the rack. So this one on top right here, this guy is only eaten 4 meals. His name is Thor. Thor is just a normal possible het desert ghost. So as far as I know, I don't think there's any sign on the desert ghost that you can see. If you have 100% het desert ghost, I don't think there's any indicator on desert ghosts that you can tell, you know, one from another. Even in the normals, I don't think you can really tell. I wish you could tell, because I really wish I knew which one was het desert ghost so I could figure it out. These are possible. I think these are like 50% het desert ghost. So I actually have a bamboo calico that someone actually got one of those hatchlings and said they produced a visual desert ghost, which means these would all be 50% throughout my whole collection. So when I say possible, it's really 50%, but look at how dark this normal is. Pretty super dark. And then compare that one to this one. So take a look at this one. This one just hatched out. As a matter of fact, this one has only had one live mouse hopper just hatched out of the egg. Really super big for a hatchling. So look at the difference in the brightness. That's kind of the thing that you can notice right away between the het clown and this other normal that's not het clown. Really a big difference between the two. I was actually surprised. It seemed like everything I hatched out, I was like, wow, that is really dramatic as far as telling the difference. Now, the other thing is sometimes it can kind of trick you. Sometimes normals can be, you know, more or less darker or lighter. So really, I think the true test would be to take like a het clown like this and then breed it to a normal. If half the offspring come out really bright, half come out, you know, really dark like this normal, then I think 100% you'd be sure, you know, within the same clutch that you'd actually be able to tell the difference between the het clowns. And I haven't actually done that yet. So, and comparing, you know, the normals from two different clutches, sometimes it can kind of trick you. But from what I'm seeing, just kind of initially, you can definitely tell. The other thing that's kind of interesting too, that I've seen a lot of people say that the alien heads, you can actually see like the Roswell gray alien heads right here with the eyes. A lot of people say they're outlined in white on the bottom of the alien heads, more white than you'd see in a regular normal. And sure enough, you can see just, well, these actually have a little bit of white, but these have a lot more white coming through there. The other thing that's kind of interesting is the spots and the pattern, pretty much like a regular normal ball python, nothing really out of the ordinary. This guy's like really tucked in there. I really wanted to see his tail underneath, see if we can actually see that line that guy was talking about underneath the tail. So this one, so he was actually saying that on his het clowns, he had, boy, this guy's like, really got a death grip on this ball here. So he was saying that right under the tail, like from the vent here all the way to the bottom, he had a line. You don't see that on this one as far as a line underneath the tail. Although he does have a line on top of the tail, which I've actually seen. Well, here's just a regular normal not het clown with a line on top of the tail. So I don't know if you can really tell that at all. If you look at the bellies, let's see if I can unwrap this guy to where we can see his belly. He is really bashful. He is really shy. All right, so belly's pretty clear on this one. Little speckling maybe here and there. Nothing really different than a normal, I would say. No like tracks like you'd see in a pied. And then if you look at this guy, it'd be interesting if this one had tracks. Oh, it kind of does. Look at that. That's really interesting, because this one, this almost looks like it's het pied, which almost kind of tricks you. You see the tracks on either side of the belly. I don't think this is het pied though. This is possible het desert ghost. Didn't come from any of my pied stuff, but you really never know. Look at that crazy belly pattern on this one too. Wow. That's pretty interesting. So this is, I'd say this is a unique normal as far as the belly on this one, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, so that just goes to show you, you always can't tell the het pieds from the other ones. I'd say the tracks are good indicators, but like you'd see on this one, if this was, matter of fact, if this was from one of my possible pied clutches, I would probably sell this as more than likely this is a het pied. So there you go. That can even trick you too with the het pieds. You get tracks, unless it'd be kind of interesting to breed this back to a pied and see if you could produce a visual pied. But I don't think you could though on this one. It just has a really, almost has a, the belly almost looks like a leopard or a confusion or something like that. Really crazy belly, which is pretty unusual, but it's definitely not a leopard or a confusion, but it's really dark though, which is interesting. So, all right, so that is the difference between these two. So what I'm actually gonna do, I wanna show you an Enchi het clown, and I wanna compare that to, as a matter of fact, I might try to find a different normal that's not het clown and compare that to the Enchi. I don't think I have an Enchi, just a straight Enchi here in my collection that's not het clown, but I definitely wanted to show you one of these Enchis. All right, so take a look at these two snakes. So here is another normal possible het desert ghost. And take a look at this one. This has kind of an interesting belly too, from a different clutch. Really busy pattern on that normal on the belly, but look at how dark it is. I've actually seen some enchies that are pretty much the same color as a normal. So you actually see some enchies with a reduced pattern, but they'll still have kind of a normal coloration. And look at this. This is an enchie that I produced with that banana clown. Look at the enchie on this one. Super bright. It's like blindingly bright. It almost looks like it has pastel in there or something. I just can't believe how bright this is. Looks like he wants to take a bite out of me too. These guys are pretty big. As a matter of fact, these guys are pretty much ready to be posted over on Morph Market. I'll actually put a link in the description below if you're interested in some snakes. I actually have quite a few that I'm posting over on Morph Market, and I'm almost tempted to hold back one of these enchies. So the question on this is this enchie really super bright because of the head clown, or is it really just a really bright version of the enchie? So if you actually look over on Morph Market, you can look at all the different versions of enchies. Some of them are really almost like a normal color. Some of them are like a super, almost like a yellow color, like this one, super bright. So it'd be interesting to take this enchie, breed it to something else, and see if you can actually produce some non-het clown enchies, and then kind of separate the het clown from the enchie and see if you can kind of produce an enchie that's not as bright, to see if it's really the het clown influence that's affecting this one. That guy definitely wants to take a bite out of me. It's definitely feeding time for these guys. Pretty wild. So take a look at this. The belly on the enchie is kind of interesting. So essentially what enchie does is it really reduces the pattern. You see, you really don't have the alien heads on the side. It kind of opens them up, kind of gets rid of the two eyes that you'd see in kind of the Roswell gray alien heads. Sometimes with the enchies, you'll actually see even more of a reduced pattern than this. Sometimes you'll see banding, sometimes this one you get like a little bit of banding on the side from the open pattern, and especially on a lot of these enchies you'll actually see kind of this stripe right on the head that opens up, and it kind of gives you this bigger spot right on the back of the head. That's a sure sign that you have an enchie. And sometimes it's hard to tell if you have an enchie too, especially in certain combinations. But I just couldn't believe how bright this enchie was, and I wish I had just a regular enchie that I can compare to. The only thing I can really compare to is a normal, because I've actually produced some enchies that look exactly like this color here in my collection that weren't het clown. So I don't know if it's a different line of enchie or if it's the influence of the het clown, which is kind of interesting. The other thing I produced here, as a matter of fact, I might go through, see what else I have that's het clown. As a matter of fact, I actually did banana versus coral glow, and there really wasn't a difference because both the banana and coral glow are so visually dominant. But I'm gonna look through my collection and see if I have anything else that I can compare side by side. Alright, so here's the last one I'm going to show you, and that is the pinstripe. So this is, I don't know if we can really compare these or not. So it looks like this one's going into shed. Look at how dark this pinstripe is compared to this pinstripe. Pretty interesting. So this one's actually pinstripe 100% het desert ghost, which is pretty interesting. And if you actually compare it to this one, this is a pinstripe 100% het clown. I would say that this is definitely a lot brighter than any pinstripe that I've ever seen. You can definitely tell there's something going on with this one. This is a definite change on this pinstripe from the het clown. So I'd say just based on this pinstripe, just this one, even without this one's going into shed. You can tell it's kind of faded out, but I can't ever remember having a pinstripe look so bright. It almost looks like it's almost a pastel color kind of breaking through. But of course, if you have a pastel in the pinstripe, the pastel really shatters the pattern and you end up with a lemon blast. So I would say based on this one snake right here, this pinstripe, this is definitely something that I've never seen. I've never seen a pinstripe that, usually the pinstripes are really super gold, even though this one's deep in shed. When they shed, they're like a really bright gold. This one's almost like a yellowish gold, with the het clown influence, which is completely different than I've ever seen. So there you have it. It definitely looks like you could have, as a matter of fact, it almost looks like it might bring a little bit of white, more white coming up into the patterns on the side, kind of like you'd see in the normals too. So as far as usually pinstripes have completely clear bellies. This one has a little bit of like freckling along the belly, which is usually not there that much. Well, let's take a look at this one. This one kind of has the same thing, I guess. All right, so yeah, you really can't tell on the bellies. Even with the het pieds, you add the pinstripe to the het pieds, you'll never get tracks with the het pieds mixing in with pinstripe. And I would say, based on just this one snake right here, there's definitely a strong influence as far as what I'm seeing with the 100% het clown, which is pretty interesting. All right, so there you have it. That's my conclusion, although I may change my mind further on down the road once I start breeding my hets and get the possible hets and see if we can, it'd be interesting to take one of these, breed it to something, and see if you can figure out, just based on the color, if you can tell which one is het clown, which would be pretty awesome. And it's a neat trick knowing the kind of the indicators of the hets, especially if you go to a reptile show and you're looking at certain snakes, and one's, you know, you have like several snakes all back to back and some are possible het clown. you kind of know what to look for with the kind of the slight indicators on some of these as far as picking the right snake for your breeding project. Sometimes you can pick up like the possible hets really super cheap if you can actually see the indicators. Sometimes you can get a really good deal on some of these things, especially if it's like a really high-end recessive project. So there you go. That is kind of interesting. I'd say I'm producing some of the brightest snakes that I've ever produced with the het clown. All right, guys, so thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.